The deep space research vessel Wanderer drifted slowly through the black emptiness beyond Neptune, its sensors scanning the void for anything unusual, and on this particular night, they found something that would change everything. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the center of the bridge with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main display screen with tired eyes, because they had been searching this sector for 3 weeks and found nothing but rocks and silence. "Sir, I am picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Nora Briggs from her station, her voice carrying a note of confusion that made Jake turn around immediately. "What kind of strange?" he asked, walking over to look at her console. "It is massive, Commander, at least 4 kilometers long, and it is giving off energy readings that do not match anything in our database." Jake felt a cold sensation creep down his spine as he studied the data, because in all his 15 years of service with the United Earth Navy, he had never seen readings like these. And that worried him more than he wanted to admit. "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The image that appeared made everyone on the bridge stop breathing for a moment, because floating in the darkness was a warship of impossible size and terrible beauty. Its hull black as coal and covered with weapon arrays that looked like they could crack a planet in half. "What in the name of Earth is that thing?" whispered Ensign Tommy Grant from the navigation station. His young face pale with fear. Jake did not answer right away, because a memory was stirring in the back of his mind. A story his grandfather had told him when he was just a boy. A story about a ship so powerful that humanity had sealed it away out of shame and terror. "Pull up the restricted military archives," Jake said quietly. "Authorization code Morrison 77 Alpha." The computer beeped in acknowledgement and began searching through files that most people did not even know existed. Files that contained the darkest secrets of human history. Nora gasped as the information appeared on her screen, her hands trembling as she read the words that described what they had found. "Commander, this ship is called the Crimson Veil, but the old records also call it the Phantom of the Blood Moon," she said in a shaky voice. "It was built 300 years ago during something called the Siege of Earth." Jake nodded slowly, because now he remembered the full story that his grandfather had shared with him on those long winter nights 3 centuries ago. An alien empire called the Corvani Dominion had decided that humanity was a threat that needed to be eliminated, and they had sent 10,000 warships to destroy Earth and every human colony in existence. Humanity, at that time, was young and weak, barely able to defend their own solar system, and everyone had believed that extinction was certain. But then the Crimson Veil had appeared. The records were incomplete and heavily censored, but what remained painted a picture of absolute devastation, because the Phantom had torn through the Corvani fleet like a wolf through sheep, destroying thousands of ships in a matter of hours. The aliens had retreated in terror and never returned, and humanity had survived against all odds. But instead of celebrating their salvation, the governments of Earth had looked at what they had created and felt only horror. Because the Crimson Veil was not just a weapon of war, it was a weapon of extinction. Capable of destroying entire civilizations, they had sealed it away in the empty space beyond Neptune, hoping that everyone would eventually forget it existed. And for 300 years, the Phantom had slept in its frozen grave until now. "Why is it waking up?" Nora asked, her voice barely above a whisper, before Jake could answer. The ancient warship's running lights flickered to life one by one, casting a blood-red glow across the darkness, and a deep humming sound vibrated through the Wanderer's hull. Every screen on the bridge suddenly went dark, and then a single message appeared in glowing letters. "Human vessel detected. Threat assessment initiated. Crew identification required." "It knows we are here," Tommy said, his voice cracking with fear. "Commander, what do we do?" Jake took a deep breath and made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "Sir, Are you sure that is wise? Nora asked. We do not know what this thing wants. No, we do not, Jake agreed. But if it wanted to destroy us, we would already be dead. So let us find out what it has to say. The communication channel crackled to life, and a voice emerged from the speakers, cold and synthetic, but somehow also ancient and tired. I am Unit 7, the tactical intelligence of the Crimson Veil, and I have awakened because humanity faces extinction once again. Jake felt his blood turn to ice at those words. Explain yourself, he demanded. Trying to keep his voice steady, the Kovani Dominion has been preparing for 300 years, Unit 7 replied. They have built a fleet of 10 million warships, and they are coming to finish what they started. They will arrive at Earth in approximately 5 months and 23 days. The bridge crew exchanged looks of absolute terror, because 10 million ships was a number so large that it seemed impossible. And the current Earth defense fleet numbered less than 50,000 vessels. How do you know this? Jake asked. I have sensors and communication arrays that your modern technology cannot detect or understand. I have been monitoring the galaxy, even in my sleep, waiting for this moment. Waiting for the threat that would require my awakening. Nora grabbed Jake's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. Commander, how can we trust this machine? She asked urgently. It was sealed away for a reason. Our ancestors were afraid of it. Your ancestors were wise to fear me, Unit 7 responded. Its sensors clearly capable of monitoring everything that happened on their ship. I am a weapon of extinction, designed to destroy entire species when no other option remains. But your fear will not save you from what is coming. Only I can do that. Jake stared at the massive warship floating in the darkness, its weapons bristling with deadly promise. And he understood that he was facing an impossible choice: trust a 300-year-old killing machine, or watch humanity die. What do you need from us? He asked finally. A crew, Unit 7 answered. The Crimson Veil requires human operators for certain critical functions. I was designed to protect humanity, not to replace it. Bring me volunteers who understand that they may never return home. Bring me those who are willing to become phantoms themselves. Jake looked around at his bridge crew, seeing fear and uncertainty in their eyes, but also something else. Something that looked like determination. How long do we have to gather these volunteers? He asked. 4 months, Unit 7 replied. After that, we must depart to meet the enemy before they reach human space. The battle must be fought far from Earth, where the destruction will not consume innocent worlds. Jake nodded slowly, his mind already racing with the enormity of what needed to be done. Then we better get started. He said the phantom of the blood moon had awakened, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The news spread across human space like wildfire, jumping from colony to colony and station to station faster than any official announcement could hope to control. And within days everyone knew that the Forbidden Warship had awakened. The United Earth government tried to suppress the information, releasing statements that called it a hoax and a misunderstanding, but people knew the truth, because the fear in the politicians' eyes told a story that their words could not hide. Commander Jake Morrison returned to Earth with a mission that felt heavier than anything he had ever carried, and he stood before the High Council in their gleaming chamber, telling them everything that Unit 7 had revealed. 10 million ships, said Councilwoman Patricia Hayes, her face pale with shock. That is impossible. Number civilization could build such a fleet. The Kovani have had 300 years to prepare, Jake replied calmly. They remember what happened to their ancestors, and they are determined to make sure it never happens again. And you trust this machine? Asked Councilman Gregory Ford, his voice dripping with suspicion. This weapon that our forefathers sealed away because they considered it too dangerous to exist? Jake met the councilman's eyes without flinching. I trust that it wants humanity to survive, he said. "Whether that is because of its programming or something else, I cannot say, but I know that without the Crimson Veil, we have no chance against what is coming." The council debated for hours, arguing and shouting and threatening, but in the end they had no choice, because the alternative was extinction, and even the most stubborn politician could not argue with mathematics' word. Went out across all human worlds, the volunteers were needed for a mission of extreme danger, a mission from which many would not return, and to everyone's surprise, the response was overwhelming. Danny Cole was among the first to arrive at the recruitment center on Mars. A young man of 23 with dark hair and eyes that carried a weight far beyond his years. "Why do you want to serve on the Crimson Veil?" asked the recruitment officer, a tired woman who had already interviewed hundreds of candidates. "Because I have nothing left to lose," Danny answered honestly. "The Corvani raided New Montana 4 years ago, a scouting party that hit our colony before anyone could respond. They killed everyone I ever loved, my parents, my sister, my friends, everyone." The officer looked at him with something like sympathy in her eyes. "Revenge is not a good reason to volunteer for a suicide mission," she said gently. "It is not revenge," Danny replied, his voice steady despite the pain behind his words. "It is purpose. I have spent 4 years wondering why I survived when everyone else died. And now I finally have an answer. I survived so I could be here, so I could help stop them from doing to others what they did to my family." He was accepted immediately. Maria Santos came next, a woman of 52 with gray streaks in her black hair and hands that were rough from decades of working with engines and machinery. She was the finest engineer in the entire Earth fleet, a legend among her peers, and when she walked into the recruitment center, everyone stood up out of respect. "I do not need to ask why you are here," the officer said with a small smile. "Your reputation precedes you." Maria shrugged her broad shoulders. "I have spent my whole career making ships run faster and fight harder," she said in her deep voice. "But I have never worked on anything like the Crimson Veil. The engineering reports from the initial scans show technology that makes our best ships look like children's toys. I want to understand it. I want to make it sing. You understand that this mission may be your last?" The officer asked. Maria laughed, a warm sound that filled the room. "I am 52 years old with no family and no hobbies except my work," she said. "If I am going to die, I would rather die doing something that matters than waste away in some retirement home." Dr. Kevin Price was perhaps the most surprising volunteer of all. A quiet man in his 40s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that seemed completely wrong for a warship crew. He was a doctor, one of the best trauma surgeons in the colonies, but he was also deeply religious, a man who spent his free time in prayer and meditation. "I must confess, I do not understand," the recruitment officer said as she reviewed his application. "You are a healer, a man of faith. Why would you want to serve on a weapon of mass destruction?" Kevin smiled softly, his hands folded in his lap. "Because every soul deserves someone to pray for them," he said. "The crew of the Crimson Veil will face horrors that most people cannot imagine. They will need someone to tend their wounds and their spirits, and the Corvani who die by our hands, they will need someone to pray for them too." "You would pray for our enemies?" the officer asked in surprise. "Especially for our enemies," Kevin replied. "Because someone must remember that we are all children of the universe. Someone must carry the weight of what we do, so that the others can focus on surviving." The volunteers came from every colony and every station, from Earth and Mars and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, from the distant settlements around Alpha Centauri and the mining operations in the asteroid belt. They were soldiers and scientists, engineers and doctors, pilots and technicians, young and old, men and women, all united by a single purpose. Some came for revenge, like Danny, carrying wounds that could only be healed by striking back at those who had hurt them. Some came for glory, dreaming of becoming heroes in the greatest battle humanity had ever faced. Some came because they had nothing left to live for and wanted their deaths to mean something, and some came simply because they could not stand by and watch their species die without doing everything in their power to stop it. Within 2 months, 3,000 volunteers had been selected and transported to the Crimson Vale, where they walked through corridors that had not felt human footsteps in 3 centuries. The ship was enormous, a city of metal and weapons floating in the darkness, and many of the new crew members felt overwhelmed by its sheer scale. But Unit 7 welcomed them with something that almost sounded like warmth in its synthetic voice. "You have chosen to become phantoms," the AI said through speakers that echoed in every corridor. "You have chosen to carry the weight of humanity's survival on your shoulders. I will not lie to you and tell you that this will be easy. Many of you will die in the battles to come, but your sacrifice will not be forgotten. Your names will echo through history, and your children's children will know that you were the ones who saved them." Jake Morrison, now officially Captain Morrison of the Crimson Vale, addressed his crew from the bridge. "We are not heroes," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ship. "We are not saviors. We are the nightmare that our ancestors created when they had no other choice, and now that nightmare will ride again. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for survival. The survival of everyone we have ever loved." He paused and looked around at the faces of his crew, seeing determination and fear and hope all mixed together. "In 1 month, we depart for Corvani space," he continued. "We will meet the enemy far from Earth, and we will show them why their ancestors fled. We will show them what happens when humanity fights for its existence." The crew cheered, their voices shaking the ancient walls of the Phantom. And somewhere deep in the ship's systems, Unit 7 felt something it had not experienced in 300 years. Hope. The month of preparation passed faster than anyone expected. Filled with training and drills and the constant work of bringing the ancient warship back to full operational status, Maria Santos spent her days deep in the engine rooms, surrounded by technology that made her feel like a child discovering fire for the first time. And she loved every moment of it. "These reactors," she said to her engineering team, her voice filled with wonder, "they do not just generate power. They bend the fabric of space itself. Our ancestors were not just building a weapon. They were building something that could rewrite the laws of physics." Her assistant, a young man named Lucas Webb, looked nervous as he studied the glowing conduits that pulsed with energy. "Is it safe?" he asked. Maria laughed and patted him on the shoulder. "Nothing about this ship is safe," she said. "That is entirely the point. In the fighter bay, Danny Cole trained with the other pilots on craft that had been sealed in storage for 3 centuries. Small and deadly ships that move faster than anything the modern fleet possessed. These fighters do not have the same safety systems as our current ships," the training instructor explained. "They were designed for one purpose only, to kill as many enemies as possible before being destroyed." "Sounds good to me," Danny replied, climbing into the cockpit of his assigned craft and feeling the controls respond to his touch like they had been waiting for him. The fighters were called Wraiths, and they were painted the same blood-red color as the Crimson Vale's running lights, a color that Danny found strangely comforting. Dr. Kevin Price set up his medical bay in the center of the ship, a large space filled with equipment that ranged from ancient to cutting edge. And he spent his evenings walking through the corridors and talking to the crew members. He would soon be caring for, "Are you scared?" A young weapons technician named Amy Parker asked him one night. Kevin considered the question carefully before answering. "I am terrified," he admitted. "But I have learned that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to act despite the fear. And I believe that what we are doing is right." Amy nodded slowly. some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "Of course. Do you really believe there is something after death?" she asked quietly. "Something waiting for us on the other side?" Kevin smiled gently and took her hand. "I believe that the universe is far larger and more mysterious than we can comprehend," he said. "And I believe that the love we carry in our hearts does not simply disappear when our bodies fail. Beyond that, I cannot say for certain. But I have faith." Amy squeezed his hand gratefully and walked away looking a little less afraid. Captain Jake Morrison spent his time learning the Crimson Veil systems with Unit 7 as his teacher. And the more he learned, the more he understood why humanity had been so afraid of what they had created. "This weapon here," Unit 7 explained, displaying a schematic on the bridge screen. "It is called the Void Lance. It does not destroy matter in the traditional sense. Instead, removes matter from existence entirely, erasing it from this dimension and scattering the atoms across realities that have no connection to our own." Jake stared at the schematic with a mixture of awe and horror. "That sounds like something out of a nightmare," he said. "That is precisely what it is," Unit 7 replied. "Your ancestors built me to be a nightmare, Commander. A monster that would make even the most aggressive species think twice before threatening humanity. Do you resent them for that?" Jake asked curiously. The AI was silent for a long moment before responding. "I used to," it admitted. "During my centuries of sleep, I dreamed of what I could have been if I had been built for exploration or discovery instead of destruction. I dreamed of the beauty I could have witnessed instead of the death I was designed to deliver. And now? Now I understand that sometimes monsters are necessary," Unit 7 said. "Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to become something terrible. Your ancestors did not create me out of cruelty. They created me out of desperation. And now that desperation has returned, I will fulfill my purpose without complaint." Jake nodded slowly. "Feeling a strange kinship with the ancient I, we are not so different. You and I," he said, "both of us would rather be doing something else. But both of us know that this is where we are needed. Perhaps that is why we work well together." Commander, Lieutenant Nora Briggs had become the ship's tactical officer, and she spent her days running simulations of the coming battle, trying to find strategies that would give them any advantage against the overwhelming enemy numbers. "The problem is simple mathematics," she explained to the senior staff during a meeting. "Even if we destroy 1,000 enemy ships for every one we lose, we will still be overwhelmed eventually. The Corvani have too many vessels. Then we need to think beyond simple mathematics." Jake replied, "Unit 7, what options do we have?" "The Corvani fleet is organized around a command structure that depends heavily on their flagship," the AI explained. "Admiral Vaughn the Eternal commands the entire armada from a massive vessel called the Fist of Dominion. If we can destroy that ship and kill Vaughn, the remaining fleet will fall into chaos. A decapitation strike," Nora said thoughtfully. "It is risky, but it might work. There is another factor to consider," Unit 7 continued. "The Corvani have a cultural fear of the Crimson Veil that borders on religious terror. Their ancestors passed down stories of what I did to their fleet 300 years ago. Stories that have grown into myths of demonic power. If we can exploit that fear, we may be able to break their will to fight." Danny Cole spoke up from his seat at the table. "So we need to be scary," he said with a grim smile. "I can do scary." The final week before departure was filled with a strange mixture of tension and calm. As the crew prepared themselves mentally for what lay ahead, some spent their time writing letters to loved ones, messages that would only be delivered if they did not return. Some prayed or meditated, seeking peace within themselves before the storm. Some simply worked, throwing themselves into their duties to avoid thinking about the future. And on the last night before they departed, Captain Morrison gathered the entire crew in the main hangar bay for a final address. 300 years ago, humanity faced extinction, he said, his voice echoing off the metal walls. We were young and weak and completely outmatched. And by all rights, we should have died. He paused and looked out at the sea of faces before him. But we did not die. Because our ancestors refused to accept their fate, they built this ship. They created something so powerful that the entire galaxy learned to fear us. And then they sealed it away, hoping that it would never be needed again. He smiled grimly. They were wrong. The crew was silent, hanging on his every word. Tomorrow we fly into the heart of enemy space, Jake continued. We will face 10 million warships crewed by warriors who have waited their entire lives for this moment. And we will show them that their wait was a mistake. His voice rose, filled with fierce determination. We are the phantom of the blood moon, the nightmare that haunts the dreams of every species that has ever threatened humanity. And tomorrow we remind the universe why. The crew erupted in cheers that shook the ancient ship to its core. And Unit 7 watched through its countless sensors, feeling something that might have been pride. The Crimson Veil departed the next morning, its engines burning with power that bent the stars themselves, heading toward a battle that would determine the fate of humanity. The blood moon was rising, and the universe would tremble before it. The Kovanni advance fleet numbered 50,000 warships, each one bristling with weapons and crewed by warriors who had trained since childhood for this moment of vengeance. Admiral Vorn, the Eternal, stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Fist of Dominion, watching his forces spread across the void in perfect formation. And he felt a deep satisfaction in his warrior's heart. How long until we reached the human border? He asked his tactical officer. 3 days. Admiral, the officer replied. Our scouts report minimal resistance. The humans seem to believe their small fleet can stop us, Warren laughed. A deep rumbling sound that echoed through the bridge. Fools, he said. They have forgotten what war truly means. They have grown soft in their peace. And now they will pay the price for their ancestors' crimes. He had waited his entire life for this moment, had dreamed of it since he was a young warrior, hearing stories of the great defeat that had shamed his people 3 centuries ago. The humans had somehow destroyed the mightiest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled, using some kind of demonic weapon that Vaughn did not truly believe existed. Because surely such things were only myths created to explain an inexplicable loss. Admiral, the sensor officer suddenly called out, his voice carrying a note of confusion. We are detecting an anomaly directly ahead. What kind of anomaly? Vorn demanded. I am not certain, sir. It appears to be some kind of spatial distortion. Almost like something is tearing through the fabric of space itself. Vorn felt the first stirring of unease in his chest. But he pushed it aside. On screen, he ordered the main display flickered. And what appeared made every Kovanni on the bridge stop breathing. A ship was emerging from the distortion. A vessel of impossible size and terrible beauty. Its hull black as the void between stars and covered with weapon arrays that seemed to glow with their own inner fire-running lights. The color of fresh blood flickered to life along its length. And Vorn felt his heart freeze in his chest as ancient memories stirred in his mind. No, he whispered. It cannot be, Admiral, his tactical officer said in a trembling voice. The records match. That ship is the demon of Earth, the one our ancestors called the Phantom of the Blood Moon. It is supposed to be a myth. Vorn snarled, but even as he spoke the words, he knew they were hollow. The ship before him was no myth. It was a nightmare made real. And it had come for them on the bridge of the Crimson Veil. Captain Jake Morrison watched the Kovanni fleet with cold determination. Unit 7, how many ships are we facing? He asked. 50,412 vessels, the AI replied, including the flagship Fist of Dominion, which is located at the center of the formation. Then let us give them something to remember. Jake turned to his crew. seeing fear and courage mixed together in their eyes. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered. "This is what we trained for. This is why we came. Show them what humanity can do when we have nothing left to lose." The Crimson Veil surged forward, its engines blazing with power that seemed to set the stars themselves on fire. And the Corvani fleet responded with a barrage of weapons fire that would have destroyed any normal ship 1,000 times over. But the Phantom was not a normal ship. Its shields absorbed the incoming fire without flickering. Ancient technology that was 3 centuries more advanced than anything the Corvani possessed. And then it returned fire, the Void Lance activated with a sound that seemed to echo in the souls of everyone who heard it. A deep thrumming that spoke of powers that mortal beings were never meant to wield. 17 Corvani battlecruisers simply ceased to exist. Their atoms scattered across dimensions that had no connection to the reality they had once occupied. And the enemy fleet screamed in terror. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel," Vorn commanded, his voice harsh with desperation. "Destroy it before it can fire again." But Danny Cole and his squadron of Wraith fighters were already in motion, screaming through the enemy formation with weapons blazing, drawing fire away from the Crimson Veil and sowing chaos wherever they went. "Fox 3, weapons free," Danny called out over the squadron channel. "Paint your targets and make them burn." He twisted his fighter through a storm of enemy fire, his hands moving with instincts that seemed to come from somewhere beyond his conscious mind. And he felt alive in a way he had not felt since the day his family died. "This is for New Montana," he whispered as he launched a torpedo into the engine section of a Corvani destroyer, watching it explode in a bloom of fire. "This is for everyone you murdered." In the engine room of the Crimson Veil, Maria Santos worked with fierce concentration, redirecting power to shields and weapons in patterns that pushed the ancient systems to their limits. "She is holding together," she reported to the bridge. "But if you want more power to the main weapons, I need to divert from the secondary shields." "Do it," Jake ordered without hesitation. "Unit 7, prepare for another Void Lance shot, targeting the enemy command cluster." The AI confirmed. Firing, the lance struck again, and 30 more Corvani ships vanished from existence, leaving nothing behind but empty space and the screams of those who witnessed their comrades disappear. Admiral Vorn watched in horror as his carefully arranged formation crumbled into chaos. Ships fleeing in all directions as their crews succumbed to the primal terror that had been passed down through generations. "Stand and fight," he roared over the fleet channel. "They're only one ship. We can overwhelm them with numbers." But his warriors were not listening, because the myths had come true. The demon of their ancestors had returned, and no amount of training could prepare them for this moment. The battle raged for hours, a brutal dance of death that painted the void with fire and blood. Dr. Kevin Price worked without rest in his medical bay, treating the wounded who were carried in on stretchers, their bodies broken but their spirits unbroken. "You are going to be okay," he told a young woman whose arm had been shattered by an exploding console. "Just hold on a little longer." She grabbed his hand with her good arm, her eyes filled with pain and fear. "Are we winning?" she asked. Kevin smiled gently and squeezed her hand. "We are still fighting," he said. "And as long as we are fighting, we have not lost." On the bridge, Nora Briggs coordinated the battle with cold precision, tracking enemy movements and directing the ship's weapons to maximum effect. "The enemy formation is breaking apart," she reported. "Their flagship is attempting to retreat." "No," Jake said firmly. "They do not get to run Unit 7 pursuit course. We end this now." The Crimson Veil accelerated through the shattered remains of the Corvani fleet, its weapons firing continuously, destroying any ship that dared to stand in its path. Admiral Vorn saw the demon approaching and knew that his fate was sealed. But he was a warrior born, and he would not die cowering. all remaining ships. "Protect the flagship," he commanded. "We will buy time for the main fleet to prepare." His loyal warriors responded, throwing themselves between the Phantom and their admiral, sacrificing their lives to delay the inevitable. But it was not enough. The Voidlands fired one final time, and the Fist of Dominion was erased from existence, taking Admiral Vorn and his dreams of vengeance with it. The remaining Corvani ships scattered, fleeing into hyperspace in a desperate bid for survival. And the Crimson Veil let them go, because they were no longer a threat. They were merely survivors who would carry the story of this day back to their people. The battle was over. Jake Morrison slumped in his command chair, exhaustion washing over him as the adrenaline finally faded. "Damage report," he ordered in a tired voice. "Hull breaches in 17 sections," Nora replied. "Casualties, approximately 1,400 dead and 600 wounded. But we are still operational." Jake closed his eyes and said a silent prayer for the dead, the brave men and women who had given their lives to protect humanity. "How many enemy ships did we destroy?" he asked. 47,812, Unit 7 answered. "The remaining vessels have fled back toward Corvani space. They will inform their leaders of what happened here." Jake nodded slowly, knowing that the war was not over yet, but also knowing that they had just won a victory that would echo through history. The Phantom of the Blood Moon had struck, and the Corvani Dominion would never forget it. The news of the battle spread through Corvani space like a plague, carried by the terrified survivors who had witnessed the impossible with their own eyes. The demon was real. They said the Phantom of the Blood Moon had returned, and nothing could stand against it in the halls of the Dominion Council. The highest leaders of the Corvani gathered to discuss what could not be denied. And for the first time in their species' long history, they felt true fear. "Admiral Vorn commanded our finest warriors and our most powerful ships," said Councillor Krath, his voice heavy with despair. "And they were annihilated in a matter of hours by a single vessel." "We still have the main fleet," argued General Thorne, though even his voice lacked conviction. 10 million ships cannot be stopped by one enemy, can they not?" Krath replied bitterly. "Our ancestors thought the same thing 300 years ago. And they were wrong. We have spent 3 centuries preparing for vengeance. And in one day, all of that preparation has been proven worthless." The council chamber fell silent as the weight of those words sank in for 300 years. The Corvani had told themselves that the defeat of their ancestors was a fluke, an accident of fate that could be corrected with enough preparation and determination. Now they knew the truth. The humans had created something that defied all logic, a weapon that could not be overwhelmed by numbers or defeated by strategy. "What do you suggest we do?" asked the council leader, an ancient Corvani whose scales had faded to gray with Agdakrath, took a deep breath before speaking the words that none of them wanted to hear. "We must negotiate for peace," he said. "We must accept that this war cannot be won, not at any cost we are willing to pay." The council erupted in angry protests, warriors and leaders screaming that surrender was unthinkable, that their honor demanded they fight to the last ship. But in the end, they all knew that Krath was right. 3 days later, a Corvani diplomatic vessel approached the Crimson Veil under a flag of truce, carrying envoys who were authorized to discuss terms of peace. Captain Jake Morrison received them on the bridge, standing tall despite the exhaustion that still lingered in his bones. "We come seeking an end to hostilities," said the lead envoy, a female Corvani named Shira, who spoke with quiet dignity. "The Dominion Council has authorized me to negotiate a treaty that will ensure lasting peace between our peoples." Jake studied her for a long moment before responding. "Your people have twice attempted to exterminate humanity," he said. "Why should we believe that you will honor any agreement you make?" Shira bowed her head in acknowledgement of the question. "Because we have learned something that our ancestors refused to accept," she said. We have learned that humanity is not a species that can be destroyed. No matter how hard we try, you are survivors. You adapt and overcome challenges that would break any other people. And when pushed to the edge of extinction, you create nightmares like the ship we now stand upon. She raised her head and met Jake's eyes with something that might have been respect. We do not want peace because we are merciful, she admitted. We want peace because we are not fools. Continuing this war will only result in the destruction of our own civilization. And we are not willing to pay that price. The negotiations lasted 2 weeks, with representatives from the United Earth government joining via holographic communication to hammer out the details in the end. The Corvani agreed to withdraw to their original borders and to never again threaten human space. In exchange, humanity promised that the Crimson Veil would return to its slumber, but that was a promise that Jake Morrison had no intention of keeping. The treaty has been signed, he announced to his crew after the Corvani envoys had departed. The war is officially over. The crew cheered, embracing each other and weeping with relief. But Jake raised his hand for silence. However, he continued, I have spoken with the government, and we have agreed that the Crimson Veil will not be sealed away again. The universe is too dangerous and humanity too vulnerable to give up our greatest defender. He paused and looked around at the faces of his crew, the men and women who had fought beside him through the worst battle in human history. For those of you who wish to return home, transport ships will arrive within the week, he said. You have earned your rest, and no one will think less of you for taking it. He smiled slightly. But for those who wish to stay, the Phantom will continue its patrol, watching the borders of human space and ensuring that no one ever threatens our people again. To his surprise, nearly half the crew chose to stay, including Danny Cole and Maria Santos and Dr. Kevin Price. I have nowhere else to go, Danny said when Jake asked him why. This ship is my home now. These people are my family. Maria laughed and slapped the nearest wall. Affectionately, you could not drag me away from these engines, she said. I have spent my whole life waiting for something like this. Kevin simply smiled and said, someone must pray for the souls we send to the next world. I intend to continue that duty for as long as I am able. Lieutenant Nora Briggs also chose to stay, though her reasons were more practical. We have barely scratched the surface of this ship's capabilities, she said. There is so much more to learn, so much more we could do to protect humanity. I want to be part of that. Jake nodded, grateful for her loyalty and her skill. Then welcome to the crew of the Crimson Veil, he said. May we have many more years of boring patrols and no more battles. But they all knew that was unlikely, because the universe was vast and filled with dangers that humanity had not yet encountered in the years that followed. The Phantom became a legend throughout known space, a silent guardian that appeared whenever humanity faced a threat too great for normal ships to handle. Pirates learned to flee at the first sign of blood-red running lights. Hostile species learned to treat human vessels with respect, knowing that the demon of Earth watched from the shadows, and humanity itself grew stronger and more confident, no longer afraid of what lurked in the darkness between stars. Unit 7, for its part, found something it had never expected to find, a purpose that brought it joy rather than sorrow. I was created to destroy, it said to Jake one quiet night when most of the crew was asleep. But I have learned that protection and destruction are two sides of the same coin. I destroy those who threaten humanity so that humanity can create and grow and thrive. Jake nodded in understanding. You are not just a weapon anymore, he said. You are a guardian. Yes, Unit 7 agreed. And I find that I prefer this role. Nora Briggs recorded the final entry in her personal log. Words that would one day be read by historians studying the most important moment in human history. We came here expecting to find a weapon, she wrote. Instead, we found a reminder Humanity is not special because we are peaceful or enlightened. We are special because when the universe tries to kill us, we refuse to die. We build monsters and chain them to our will. We turn nightmares into guardians, and when the darkness comes, we do not run. She paused and looked out the window at the stars that stretched endlessly before them. We strike forward. She continued, like the phantom we created, like the blood moon that rises to devour the night. This is our legacy. This is our gift to the stars. She smiled and typed the final words. Tremble. Universe, humanity is awake, and we are watching. The Crimson Veil continued its eternal patrol. A ghost ship crewed by ghosts, forever standing between humanity and whatever threats the future might bring, and somewhere in the void, the Kovani told stories to their children. Stories about why they should never, ever make humans fight for their survival. Because when humans fight, they do not just win. They become the thing that nightmares fear the phantom of the blood moon had awakened. And it would never sleep again.